Look, I'm going to tell you something that might sting a little. You're probably wasting most of your life worrying about things that will never happen. And the crazy part, you already know this. But here's what you don't know. There's a simple mental shift that can change everything. It's not some mystical meditation practice or expensive therapy. It's something a regular guy named Marcus figured out on a random Tuesday morning when his entire world felt like it was crumbling. And by the end of his story, you'll understand why the version of you that went to bed last night was carrying unnecessary weight that you can drop right now, today, this moment. Stay with me. Because what Marcus discovered didn't just change his career, it literally rewired how his brain processed fear itself. Marcus woke up every single morning with the same suffocating thought pattern. It was like a broken record player in his mind, stuck on the same two stations, yesterday and tomorrow, never today. God, if I hadn't screwed up that email last week, everything would be different right now. Then, before that thought even finished, his brain would jump forward. And if I keep messing up like this, I'm going to lose everything, my job, my reputation, everything. It was exhausting. His mind was never actually here. It was either replaying old footage or creating horror movie trailers for a future that didn't even exist yet. Marcus worked at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago. Nothing fancy, nothing terrible, just a regular corporate job with regular corporate stress. But here's the thing about Marcus. He made everything harder than it needed to be. Not because he wasn't smart, not because he wasn't capable, but because he was fighting battles on 3 different timelines simultaneously. One particular morning, Marcus was staring at his laptop screen, cursor blinking mockingly on a blank presentation slide. He had a big pitch meeting in 3 days. The client was important. His boss had made that crystal clear. But Marcus wasn't preparing. He was paralyzed. His mind kept looping back to 6 months ago when he'd completely bombed a similar presentation. He could still see the client's confused expression, could still hear the awkward silence after he'd stammered through his 3rd slide, could still feel the heat rising in his face as his boss had given him that disappointed look afterward. And now his brain was fast-forwarding, creating vivid scenarios of this upcoming presentation, going even worse. What if I freeze again? What if they ask a question I can't answer? What if this is the mistake that finally gets me fired? His hands were actually shaking over something that hadn't even happened yet. That's when Ben walked over. Ben was one of those annoyingly calm people. Not in a fake way, he just seemed to operate on a different frequency than everyone else. While the rest of the office spiraled over deadlines and metrics, Ben moved through it all like he had some secret instruction manual the rest of them hadn't received. Hey, man, you look like you're about to jump out of that window, and we're only on the 3rd floor, so that's just going to be embarrassing, not effective. Marcus managed a weak smile. Just stressed about this pitch on Friday. The one that's 3 days away? Yeah. The one you haven't even started preparing for because you're too busy reliving the last one? Marcus looked up. How did you? Because I know that look. I used to wear it every single day. Ben pulled up a chair. Let me ask you something. Where are you right now? Marcus blinked. What do you mean? I'm here, at my desk. No, I mean mentally. Where is your mind actually living right now? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then stopped, because Ben was right. His mind wasn't here at all. I'm thinking about last time. Last time is over. Can't change it. What else? And I'm worried about Friday. Friday hasn't happened. Can't control it. So where does that leave you? Marcus sat in silence. Ben leaned forward. Here's what I learned the hard way, and I'm going to save you about 5 years of therapy bills. You can only control one single day. Today, right now, this moment, everything else is just mental noise. But I need to prepare for... Exactly. You need to prepare today, not worry about it, not replay the past, actually sit here in this moment and do the work. That's the only thing that's real. Marcus wanted to argue, but something about the simplicity of it hit differently. Ben continued, Imagine you're walking down a long, dark road at night, and you've only got a flashlight that illuminates about 10 feet ahead of you. What do? Do you freak out because you can't see the whole road? Or do you focus on those 10 feet, take those steps, and trust that the next 10 feet will appear when you need them? I'd focus on the 10 feet. Right, because that's all you can actually see. That's all you can actually walk on. Everything else is just darkness that you're inventing monsters in. Marcus felt something shift. Not a huge revelation, more like a tiny crack in a wall he'd been building his whole life. So what do? You ask yourself one question every morning. What can I win today? Not this week, not this quarter. Today. And then you win that day. That afternoon, Marcus tried something different. He closed all the tabs in his browser related to his past failures. He stopped running through future disaster scenarios. And he asked himself, what does winning today look like? The answer was surprisingly simple. Finish the first draft of this presentation. Not a perfect presentation, not an award-winning presentation, just a first draft. So he started. And here's what he noticed. The moment he started actually doing something, instead of worrying about everything, his anxiety decreased. Not completely, but enough to breathe. He worked for 2 hours straight. No catastrophizing, no replaying old failures. Just work. By the end of the day, he had 10 slides. Rough, definitely needed polish, but they existed. He'd won that day. And something interesting happened over the next 2 days. Each morning, he'd ask the same question. What can I win today? Tuesday. Refine the slides and practice the delivery once. Wednesday, do a full run-through and get feedback from Ben. Thursday, make final tweaks and get a good night's sleep. By Friday morning, he wasn't calm. He was still nervous. But it was a different kind of nervous, not the paralyzing, stomach-churning terror of his past presentations. This was more like readiness, anticipation. The presentation room felt smaller than he remembered. The clients were already seated. His boss gave him an encouraging nod. Marcus took a breath and reminded himself of Ben's words. Win today, just today. He started his pitch, and about 30 seconds in, he felt it, that old familiar panic trying to creep in. The voice that said, You're going to mess this up just like last time. But this time, he had a different response. Not today. He wasn't in the past anymore. He wasn't in some imaginary future. He was here, in this room, talking to real people about a real solution. And he stayed there. He didn't nail every word perfectly. There was a moment where he stumbled slightly on a data point. But instead of spiraling, he just corrected himself and moved on. Stayed present. When he finished, there was a pause. Then the lead client smiled. "That was really solid, Marcus. We'd like to move forward." His boss actually looked impressed. "Nice work." Marcus walked out of that room with something he hadn't felt in months. Confidence. Not because everything had gone perfectly, but because he'd shown up fully for today. That evening, over coffee, Ben asked him how it went. It was good. Really good, actually. What changed? Marcus thought about it. I stopped trying to carry yesterday and tomorrow into that room with me. I just showed up for the hour I was in. Ben grinned. And that's the whole game, man. That's literally it. Over the next few weeks, Marcus started applying this to everything. When he caught himself spiraling about a mistake from last month, he'd ask, "Can I change it?" If the answer was no, he'd let it go. When he found himself catastrophizing about something that might happen next year, he'd ask, "Is this happening today?" If not, he'd redirect. It sounds almost too simple, and that's what made it so powerful. One morning, his mom called. She could hear the difference in his voice. "You sound lighter. What's changed?" Marcus smiled. "I stopped trying to live my entire life all at once. Now I just live one day." His mom was quiet for a moment. "That's actually really wise, honey." "Yeah, well, I had a good teacher." The truth is, most of us are exactly like Marcus used to be. We're either stuck in the rear-view mirror of our regrets, or we're white-knuckling the steering wheel, terrified of what's around the next corner. But here's what Marcus learned. You can't change the past. You can't control the future. The only thing you actually have power over is right now, this moment, today. And when you really embrace that, when you stop spreading your mental energy across 3 different timelines and focus it all on the present, something incredible happens. You stop being a victim of your own mind. You start actually living. Marcus started noticing other changes too. He slept better. Not because his problems went away, but because he stopped taking them to bed with him. He'd literally tell himself before sleeping, "Today is done. I did what I could. Tomorrow gets a fresh start." At work, his performance improved, not because he suddenly became smarter or more skilled, but because he was fully present during meetings instead of mentally rehearsing his anxieties. His relationships got better. When he was with friends, he was actually with them. Not physically present, but mentally absent, running through his worries like background noise. For the first time in years, he felt like he was living in his actual life instead of watching it happen from behind a screen of constant anxiety. But life doesn't let you off that easy. Just when you think you've figured something out, it tests you. Hard. And Marcus's next test was coming. About 3 weeks after Marcus's successful presentation, his phone buzzed during lunch. It was his boss. "Marcus, can you come to my office when you get a chance?" That phrase, that exact phrase that makes every employee's stomach drop. "Can you come to my office when you get a chance?" It's never good news delivered that casually. Good news comes with specifics. "Great job on the Miller account." Bad news comes with vague summons. Marcus felt his old patterns trying to kick back in. His mind immediately started spinning worst-case scenarios like a slot machine of anxiety. "You're getting fired." "They found out about that mistake you made 2 months ago." "Someone complained about you." He could feel his chest tightening, his hands getting clammy. Then he stopped himself. He literally stopped walking in the middle of the hallway and took a breath. What do I actually know right now? He asked himself. The answer: nothing. He knew nothing except that his boss wanted to talk to him. Everything else, every scary scenario playing in his head, was fiction. His brain was writing horror stories about a future that didn't exist yet. He walked to his boss's office and knocked. "Come in, Marcus. Close the door." Okay, that didn't help the anxiety. His boss, Richard, was sitting behind his desk with a folder open. He looked up and smiled. Not a warm smile, more like a "this is going to be uncomfortable for both of us" smile. "Marcus, I'll cut to the chase. The company is restructuring. We're merging some departments, shifting some roles around. Nothing's finalized yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up that your position might be affected." There it was. The thing Marcus's brain had been preparing for his entire career. The nightmare scenario that justified every anxious thought he'd ever had. "What does affected mean?" Marcus heard himself ask. "Honestly, I don't know yet. Could mean a new role, could mean a lateral move, could mean other things. We'll know more in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 14 days of not knowing whether he'd have a job. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "I know it's not ideal," Richard continued, "but I wanted you to hear it from me first. You're a solid employee, Marcus. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, it's not about your performance." Marcus nodded numbly and somehow made it back to his desk. For the next hour, he just stared at his screen. This was it. This was the moment where everything he'd been learning would either work or prove itself to be useless, positive thinking garbage. Because right now, in this moment, he wanted to panic. He wanted to spiral. He wanted to spend the next 2 weeks creating elaborate disaster scenarios and backup plans for backups. His phone buzzed. "Ben, coffee? You look like you just saw a ghost." 10 minutes later, they were sitting at the coffee shop down the block. Marcus explained everything. Ben listened without interrupting, then said something that initially pissed Marcus off. "Okay, so what are you going to do about it right now?" "What am I going to do, Ben? I might lose my job. I might—" "Right now, in this moment, what can you actually do about it?" Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The honest answer? Nothing. He couldn't control the restructuring. He couldn't force a decision to happen faster. He couldn't change whatever was going to happen. "Nothing," Marcus admitted quietly. "I can't do anything right now." "Then why are you acting like you can?" Marcus looked up, confused. Ben leaned forward. "You're sitting here using all your mental energy on something you have zero control over. That's not preparation. That's not productivity. That's just suffering in advance." "But I can't just ignore it." "I'm not saying ignore it. I'm saying stop letting it control your today. Here's what you can control. You can update your resume. You can reach out to your network. You can make sure you're doing great work these next 2 weeks, so if it comes down to a decision, you're the obvious choice to keep. Those are actions. The rest? That's just mental torture that helps nobody." Marcus sat back. Ben was right, and he hated it. "So I just, what, pretend everything's fine?" "No. You acknowledge the situation, you prepare for the worst-case scenario, and then you live your life. Because here's the thing. If you spend the next 2 weeks anxious and miserable, and then you lose your job, you've actually lost 2 weeks and your job. But if you spend the next 2 weeks living your life, doing your work, preparing smartly, and then you lose your job, at least you only lost the job. You didn't lose the time, too. Something clicked. Marcus had never thought about it that way. Worrying didn't give him extra time. It just stole the time he had. Plus, Ben added with a slight smile, what if you don't lose your job? What if this restructuring actually ends up being a good thing? Then you just wasted 2 weeks being miserable over nothing. I hadn't thought of that. Nobody does. We're all programmed to expect the worst. But the worst usually doesn't happen. And even when it does, worrying about it in advance doesn't make it hurt less. That night, Marcus did something difficult. He sat down with a notebook and wrote at the top, "What's the actual worst-case scenario?" He'd been avoiding this question for years because it felt too scary to answer directly. But Ben's words kept echoing. Face it. Don't run from it. He started writing, "Worst case, I lose my job." Just writing it out made his heart race. But he forced himself to continue. "If I lose my job, I have about 4 months of savings. I can file for unemployment while I search. I have a good network. I could reach out to former colleagues. I have skills that are marketable. This isn't 2008. The job market is actually pretty decent." He stared at what he'd written. The worst-case scenario was bad. It would be stressful. It would be scary. But it wasn't the apocalypse his anxiety was making it out to be. Then he wrote something else. Can I survive this? He sat with that question for a long moment. Then slowly he wrote, yes, it wouldn't be fun, it wouldn't be easy, but he would survive it. And something strange happened in that moment. The fear didn't disappear, but it got smaller, more manageable. It went from this huge, undefined monster in the shadows to just a problem, a difficult problem, but a problem with potential solutions. He wrote one more line. What can I do to improve even the worst-case scenario? Now his brain shifted from panic mode to problem-solving mode. Update resume this weekend, reach out to 3 former colleagues this week, apply to 2 positions just to test the market. Save an extra $500 this month. Excel at work these next 2 weeks. Suddenly, he had a plan. And where there's a plan, fear starts to lose its grip. The next 2 weeks were weird. Everyone in the office was on edge. People were whispering in corners. There were theories about who was safe and who wasn't. Some people were openly panicking, sending out resumes during lunch breaks. Marcus felt the pull to join that energy, but every time he started to spiral, he'd remind himself, what can I control today? He updated his resume. He had 3 great coffee meetings with people in his network. He applied to 2 positions, not because he was desperate, but because he wanted to see what was out there. And at work, he crushed it. He showed up early. He contributed in meetings. He helped teammates who were struggling, not because he was trying to save his job through sheer work ethic, but because he'd decided that regardless of what happened, he wasn't going to waste these 2 weeks being miserable. Ben checked in with him halfway through. How are you holding up? Honestly, better than I expected. I'm still nervous, but I'm not drowning in it. That's growth, man. Marcus nodded. I kept asking myself, will worrying about this change the outcome? And the answer is always no. So I just stopped, or at least I stopped letting it run the show. You accepted the worst-case scenario. Yeah, and once I did that, it lost its power. It's still scary, but it's not paralyzing anymore. The day before the announcement, Marcus was surprisingly calm, not because he knew what would happen, but because he'd made peace with both possibilities. If he kept his job, great, he'd keep doing good work. If he lost his job, hard, but he'd handle it. He had a plan. Either way, he wasn't going to let uncertainty steal any more of his present moments. The announcement came on a Thursday afternoon. Everyone gathered in the main conference room. The energy was tense. People were gripping their phones, some visibly shaking. The VP of Operations walked in with a serious expression. "I know the last few weeks have been stressful, and I appreciate your patience. After careful consideration, here's what we've decided." Marcus felt his heart pounding, but he stayed present. Didn't let his mind race ahead. The VP explained the restructuring. Some departments were merging. 3 positions were being eliminated. 5 people were being moved to new roles. Marcus's name was in the new role category. He was being shifted to a different team. Actually, a team he'd wanted to be on for months. It came with a small raise. Relief washed over him. But it wasn't just relief about keeping his job. It was relief that he'd spent the last 2 weeks actually living instead of just surviving. He'd prepared for the worst but hadn't surrendered his present to it. After the meeting, several colleagues came up to him. "How are you so calm? I've been a wreck for 2 weeks." Marcus shrugged. "I figured worrying wouldn't change anything, so I just focused on what I could control." One of them laughed bitterly. "Must be nice to just not worry." But that wasn't it. Marcus didn't just not worry. He'd felt all the same fears everyone else had. The difference was that he didn't let those fears dictate how he spent his time. He'd acknowledged them, prepared for them, and then continued living. That evening, Marcus and Ben grabbed dinner. "Congrats on the new role," Ben said, raising his beer. "Thanks. Honestly, I'm more proud of how I handled the waiting than I am about the outcome." That's the real win. You didn't let uncertainty destroy your present. That's huge. Marcus took a sip of his drink. "I keep thinking about something you said, about how if you worry for 2 weeks and then a bad thing happens, you've actually lost 2 weeks and the thing. That really stuck with me. Changed my life when I figured that out." "What made you figure it out?" Ben got quiet for a moment. "I spent 6 months worried that my dad was dying from cancer. 6 months of barely sleeping, constantly catastrophizing, unable to focus on anything else. And you know what? He survived. The treatment worked. But I can never get those 6 months back. I basically grieved someone who didn't die. And I realized that even if he had died, my worrying wouldn't have helped him or me. It just would have meant I suffered twice." Marcus felt that land hard. "So now," Ben continued, "when something scary is happening, I ask myself, is this happening right now? If no, I let it go. If yes, I deal with it. But I don't suffer through things that haven't happened yet. That's the hardest part for me. My brain wants to prepare for every possible outcome. Preparation is good. Worry is useless. Preparation is action. Worry is just suffering without purpose." Marcus nodded slowly. "Preparation versus worry. I like that distinction." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus said something he'd been thinking about all day. "I think I spent most of my life believing that worry was somehow productive. Like if I worried enough about something, I could prevent it from happening, or at least I'd be ready for it. And it's bullshit. Worry never prevented anything. It just made me miserable while I waited to find out what would actually happen. Ben smiled. Now you're getting it. Marcus felt different walking home that night. Lighter, somehow. He'd faced one of his biggest fears, job loss, and he'd survived the uncertainty without falling apart. More than that, he'd learned something crucial. The anticipation of pain is often worse than the pain itself. He'd spent years terrified of losing his job. And when it almost happened, when he sat in that uncertainty for 2 full weeks, it was hard, yes. But it wasn't the world-ending catastrophe his anxiety had promised. And even if he had lost his job, he would have been okay. That realization was freedom. Marcus thought he had it all figured out. He'd learned to live in the present. He'd learned to stop catastrophizing about the future. He'd even survived genuine uncertainty without falling apart. But life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs right when you think you've mastered the game. About a month into his new role, Marcus was walking into a Monday morning meeting when his phone rang. It was his sister, Sarah. She never called during work hours. "Sarah, everything okay?" Her voice was shaky. "Marcus, it's Mom. She collapsed this morning. We're at St. Mary's Hospital. Can you come?" The world tilted. "What happened? Is she?" "They're running tests. Just, can you come? Please." "I'm on my way." Marcus grabbed his keys and ran. The entire drive to the hospital, his mind was doing exactly what he'd been training it not to do, racing ahead into terrible futures that didn't exist yet. What if it's a stroke? What if it's her heart? What if this is serious? What if I lose her? He gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to breathe. "Stop," he told himself. "You don't know anything yet. Stay present." But this was different. This wasn't work stress or career anxiety. This was his mom. He pulled into the hospital parking lot, and for a moment, he just sat there, trying to steady himself. Ben's words came back to him. "Can you control it? If no, let it go. But how do you let go when it's someone you love?" Sarah was in the waiting room, her eyes red. She stood when she saw him. "Any news?" Marcus asked, pulling her into a hug. "Not yet. They said the doctor will come talk to us soon." They sat down. The waiting room had that distinct hospital smell, antiseptic, mixed with anxiety. A TV was playing some morning show nobody was watching. Other families sat in similar states of suspended animation, waiting for news that would either break them or relieve them. Marcus's leg was bouncing. He couldn't sit still. Sarah noticed. "You okay?" "Just worried." "Yeah, me too." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Marcus asked, "What exactly happened?" "She was making breakfast and just went down. I thought she tripped at first, but she was really disoriented. Couldn't tell me what day it was. So I called 911. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Disoriented? That sounds like—" "Don't," Sarah interrupted gently. "Don't go there yet. We don't know anything." She was right, but knowing that and stopping his brain from spinning were two very different things. An hour passed, then another. Every time a doctor walked through the waiting room doors, Marcus's heart would jump, then sink when they called someone else's name. Finally, a doctor in blue scrubs approached them. "Family of Patricia Chen?" They both stood. "That's us," Sarah said. "I'm Dr. Martinez. Your mother is stable. We're still running some tests, but her vitals are good. We think she had a severe drop in blood pressure, possibly related to her medication. We're going to keep her overnight for observation and adjust her prescriptions. The relief was so intense, Marcus actually felt dizzy. "Can we see her?" Sarah asked. "In about 20 minutes. She's resting now, but she's asking for you both." After the doctor left, Sarah started crying. The good kind of crying, the release of 2 hours of held breath. Marcus pulled her close. "She's okay. She's going to be okay." But even as he said it, even as the immediate crisis passed, something lingered. The fear. Not just fear for his mom, though that was certainly there, but a deeper, more unsettling realization. You can't control everything. No matter how present you are, no matter how much you prepare, life can still hit you with things you can't prevent. Later that evening, after they'd seen their mom, who was tired but smiling, already complaining about the hospital food, Marcus sat in his car in the parking garage. He called Ben. "Hey, man, everything okay? You missed a team meeting." "My mom's in the hospital. She's fine. Well, she will be. But it's been a rough day." "Jesus, Marcus, I'm sorry. You need anything?" "Actually, yeah. I need to ask you something." "Shoot." Marcus paused, trying to formulate the question that had been burning in his mind since the doctor gave them the good news. How do you stay present when the thing you're worried about is something you genuinely can't control? Like, with work stuff, I can take action. I can prepare. But with this, I can't prevent my mom from getting older. I can't control her health. So what do I do with that fear? Ben was quiet for a moment. That's the advanced level, man. That's the question that separates people who understand this stuff intellectually from people who really live it. And the answer is going to sound cold at first, but hear me out. Okay, you accept that you can't control it fully, completely. You stop fighting that reality. Marcus frowned. That sounds like giving up. No, it's the opposite. Fighting reality. Trying to control things you fundamentally cannot control. That's what drains you. That's what keeps you anxious 24/7. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's recognizing what's in your power and what isn't. But I love my mom. I can't just accept that something might happen to her. I'm not saying accept that something bad will happen. I'm saying accept that you don't control it. There's a difference. Marcus sat with that. Ben continued. Here's what I learned when my dad was sick. I was driving myself insane trying to control the uncontrollable, reading every medical article, second-guessing every doctor, catastrophizing about every possible outcome, and none of it helped. Not him, not me. So what did you do? I asked myself a different question. Instead of, how do I control this? I asked, what can I actually do right now that matters? And what was the answer? Be present with him. Make the time we had good. Handle the practical stuff, insurance, medications, logistics. Let him know he wasn't alone. Those were things I could do. The rest, I had to let it go. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. You're saying I focus on what I can give, not what I might lose. Exactly. Because here's the brutal truth. We're all going to lose the people we love eventually. That's not pessimism, that's just life. But if you spend all your time with them worrying about losing them, you've already lost the time you have. Marcus closed his eyes. That's hard. Yeah, it is. But it's also the only way to actually be with the people you love instead of just being physically near them while your mind spirals. They talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. Marcus sat in his car, engine off, in the dim parking garage light. His mom was okay, this time, but Ben was right. Someday, she wouldn't be. Someday, something would happen that couldn't be fixed with medication adjustments and overnight observation. And he could either spend the time between now and then living in fear of that moment, or he could actually show up for the time they had. It wasn't even really a choice. Over the next few days, Marcus visited his mom every evening after work. They'd talk about nothing important. Her garden, his new role at work, whether they should order Thai or Italian for dinner, but he was actually there, present, listening, not thinking about what might happen next month or next year, just being with her in those moments. One evening, she looked at him curiously. "You seem different lately." "Different how?" "I don't know. Calmer, maybe? You used to always seem like you were somewhere else in your head, but now you're really here." Marcus smiled. "I'm trying to be." She patted his hand. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You seem happier." After she fell asleep, Marcus sat in the chair next to her bed, watching her breathe. The fear was still there. The awareness that someday this could be serious, could be final. But he wasn't letting that future fear steal this present moment. This moment, she was here, she was okay, and he was with her. That was enough. When Marcus got back to work the following Monday, something had changed in him. Not in an obvious external way, but internally, something had settled. He'd faced a different kind of uncertainty, the kind you can't prepare for with resume updates and networking, the kind that reminds you that control is often an illusion, and he'd survived it without falling apart. During the morning team meeting, his new manager, Lisa, was going through upcoming projects. One caught Marcus's attention. "We need someone to lead the Davidson account. It's high profile, high stakes. Client's a bit difficult. Who wants it?" The room went silent. Marcus knew why. The Davidson account had a reputation. Demanding client, impossible deadlines, career-making if you succeeded, career-damaging if you failed. Old Marcus would have stayed quiet, would have convinced himself he wasn't ready. But something was different now. Marcus raised his hand. "I'll take it." Lisa looked surprised. "You sure? It's going to be intense." "I'm sure." After the meeting, Ben caught up with him in the hallway. "The Davidson account? That's bold." Marcus shrugged. "Figured I'd stop waiting until I feel ready and just do it." "What changed?" "I spent the last week sitting in a hospital room not knowing if my mom was going to be okay. Made me realize I've been playing it safe my whole life, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances. But there's no such thing, so I might as well take the shot." Ben grinned. "Now you're talking. Plus, what's the worst that could happen? I fail? I've been afraid of failure my whole life, and you know what I realized? I've probably failed more times by not trying than I would have by actually trying and messing up." "That's a pretty profound realization." "Yeah, well, almost losing someone you love tends to put things in perspective." The Davidson account was exactly as intense as advertised. The client, Margaret Davidson, was a successful tech entrepreneur in her 50s who had very specific ideas about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. Their first meeting was challenging. Marcus presented his initial strategy, and before he could finish his second slide, Margaret interrupted. "Stop. This is completely wrong. You're approaching this like every other agency, and that's exactly what I don't want." Old Marcus would have crumbled, would have stammered through an apology and promised to redo everything. New Marcus took a breath and said, "Okay, help me understand what you're looking for." They spent the next hour in intense discussion, not Marcus presenting, but actually collaborating. Margaret challenged every assumption, and instead of getting defensive, Marcus engaged with her challenges. By the end, they had something completely different from what he'd prepared, and it was better. As they were wrapping up, Margaret looked at him with something that might have been approval. "You're not like the last guy they sent me. He just kept trying to sell me his ideas. You actually listened. I figured your input was more valuable than my ego." She almost smiled. "Interesting. Okay, Marcus, let's see what you come up with." Walking out of that meeting, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected: excitement. Not because it had gone perfectly, it definitely hadn't, but because he'd shown up fully, engaged genuinely, and rolled with the punches. He'd stopped trying to control the outcome and just focused on being present in the conversation. And somehow that made everything better. Over the next month, Marcus threw himself into the Davidson account. There were late nights, stressful revisions, moments where he genuinely wasn't sure if he could pull it off. But he kept coming back to his core question: what can I win today? Some days, winning meant nailing a presentation. Some days, winning meant handling Margaret's harsh feedback without getting defensive. Some days, winning just meant showing up despite being exhausted. He stopped measuring success by the final outcome and started measuring it by daily effort. And something interesting happened. The work got better, not because he stopped caring about results, but because he stopped being paralyzed by the need to guarantee those results. He took risks he wouldn't have taken before, tried creative approaches, spoke up when he disagreed with Margaret's direction instead of just nodding along, and Margaret responded to it. "You know what I like about you, Marcus," she said during one of their meetings. "You're not afraid to push back. Most people just try to make me happy. You actually try to do good work. Is there a difference? Huge difference. Making me happy is about ego. Doing good work is about results." 6 weeks into the project, they presented the final campaign to Margaret's executive team. Marcus had prepared thoroughly, but not obsessively. He knew his material, but he also knew that even perfect preparation couldn't control how people would react. The presentation went well. Not flawlessly. There were tough questions, moments of challenge, but well. At the end, Margaret's CFO leaned back in his chair and said, "This is really solid. I think we should move forward." Margaret nodded. "Agreed. Good work, Marcus." After everyone filed out, Margaret stayed behind. "I'm impressed," she said simply. "When Lisa first assigned you to this, I wasn't sure. You seemed competent, but maybe too safe. But you brought something different. You were willing to be challenged and actually engage with it instead of just defending yourself." "I had a good teacher," Marcus said, thinking of Ben. "Well, whatever changed in you, keep it. You've got potential." That evening, Marcus met Ben for their usual post-victory beer. "Congrats on landing the Davidson account long-term," Ben said. "Lisa told me they want you for the next campaign, too." "Thanks. Feels good." "More than that, it's a big deal. Margaret doesn't hand out repeat business easily." Marcus took a sip of his beer. You know what's weird? 6 months ago, I would have been terrified of this account, would have convinced myself I wasn't ready. But now you just did it. Yeah, I stopped waiting to feel confident and just started acting confident. And somewhere along the way, it became real. Ben nodded. That's how it works. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's a result of it. I wish someone had told me that 10 years ago. Would you have believed them? Marcus laughed. Probably not. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus said, My mom asked me something the other day. She said I seemed happier, and I realized I am. Not because everything's perfect, but because I stopped waiting for everything to be perfect before I let myself actually live. That's the whole thing right there. What is? Most people spend their lives waiting until they feel ready, waiting until circumstances are perfect, waiting until the fear goes away, but the fear never fully goes away. The circumstances never become perfect. You just have to decide you're going to live anyway. Marcus thought about that. I used to think courage meant not being afraid, but it doesn't, does it? No. Courage means being afraid and doing it anyway. It means accepting that you can't control the outcome, but choosing to show up fully regardless. When did you figure all this out? Ben smiled. I'm still figuring it out. Every day. That's the thing. It's not like you master this once and you're done. Life keeps throwing you new situations that test you. You just get better at recognizing the patterns. What? Patterns? The pattern of your own mind trying to protect you by keeping you small. The pattern of anxiety masquerading as preparation. The pattern of control being an illusion you keep chasing. Marcus nodded slowly. And once you see those patterns, you can choose differently. Not perfectly, not every time, but more often than before. They finished their beers and walked out into the cool evening air. Marcus felt different than he had 6 months ago. Not fixed. He still had moments of anxiety, still caught himself catastrophizing occasionally, but now he knew what to do with those moments. He didn't fight them or judge himself for having them. He just noticed them, questioned them, and chose differently. And slowly, day by day, that was changing everything. 3 months into leading the Davidson account, Marcus had fallen into a rhythm he'd never experienced before in his career. Not a comfortable rhythm, not an easy one, but a sustainable one. He was working hard, probably harder than he ever had, but he wasn't burning out. The difference was simple. He'd stopped carrying yesterday's mistakes and tomorrow's fears into today's work. But life, as it tends to do, was about to teach him another lesson. It started with an email from Margaret on a Friday afternoon. Marcus, we need to talk. Monday, 9 a.m., my office. Come prepared. That was it. No context. No hint of what it was about. Marcus stared at the email and immediately felt his old friend anxiety trying to make a comeback. Come prepared for what? Is she unhappy with something? Did I mess up? Is she pulling the account? He caught himself spiraling and stopped. Okay, he said out loud to his empty apartment. What do I actually know? The facts. Margaret wants to meet Monday. She said, come prepared. Everything else, every scary scenario his brain was cooking up, was speculation, fiction. His mind trying to write a horror story about a future that didn't exist yet. But here's the thing about anxiety. Knowing it's irrational doesn't make it disappear. Marcus spent Friday evening trying to distract himself. He went for a run, made dinner, watched a movie. But underneath it all, that email sat in his mind like a splinter. By Saturday morning, he was pacing his apartment. Finally, he called Ben. "You busy?" "Never too busy for you, man. What's up?" "I need to talk through something. Can I come over?" "Already got the coffee ready." 30 minutes later, Marcus was sitting on Ben's balcony overlooking the city. He explained the situation, the vague email, the weekend of not knowing, the anxiety trying to creep back in. Ben listened, then asked a question Marcus wasn't expecting. "What would you tell someone else in your situation?" Marcus blinked. "What?" "If your friend came to you with this exact problem, what advice would you give them?" Marcus thought about it. "I'd probably say, don't make up stories. Wait for the facts. Don't ruin your weekend over something you can't control." Good advice. But it's harder to follow it myself. It always is. So let me ask you something else. What's the worst-case scenario here? Marcus had been avoiding this question all night, but he forced himself to answer honestly. Worst case? She's unhappy with my work and pulls the account. I look bad in front of Lisa. Maybe it affects my standing at the company. Okay, and if that happens, can you handle it? I mean, yeah, it would suck, but I'd survive. So you've already survived a worst-case scenario in your head. Everything else is just degrees of better than that. Marcus nodded slowly. Ben continued, "Here's what I've learned about anxiety. It's always worse in the unknown. The moment you drag it into the light and look at it directly like you just did, it gets smaller. Not gone, but smaller. So what do I do with the rest of my weekend? You live it. You don't let a meeting that hasn't happened yet steal 2.5 days from you. Because even if Monday goes badly, you still wasted your weekend for nothing." Marcus sat back. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy. There's a difference." "How do you do it? How do you actually let go when your brain wants to obsess?" Ben thought for a moment. "I give myself permission to think about it, but with a time limit. Like, okay, brain, you can worry about this for 15 minutes. Go wild. Get it all out. But after that, we're done for the day." That actually works? Try it. Right now. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Tell me every worried thought you have about Monday. Don't hold back. Marcus pulled out his phone and set a timer. Then he just talked. Every fear, every what-if, every catastrophic scenario. Ben didn't interrupt, didn't reassure, just let him empty it all out. When the timer went off, Ben said, "Okay, time's up. Now we're done thinking about it until Monday." Just like that. Just like that. You gave your anxiety its time. Now you do something else. And weirdly, it worked. Not perfectly. Marcus still caught himself thinking about the meeting occasionally over the weekend. But each time, he'd remind himself, "I already gave this my 15 minutes. Not doing this now." By Sunday evening, he felt okay. Not completely. Calm, but functional. Present. He'd actually enjoyed his weekend instead of sacrificing it to the altar of anxiety. Monday morning arrived. Marcus got to Margaret's office at 8:55 a.m. Her assistant smiled and said, "She's expecting you. Go right in." Margaret was at her desk, looking at her laptop. She glanced up when he entered. "Marcus, sit." He sat, trying to read her expression. Neutral, unreadable. "I'll get right to it," she said. I'm launching a new product line. It's a big deal, probably the biggest thing I've done in 5 years. And I want your team to handle the entire marketing campaign." Marcus blinked. That's great. But," Margaret interrupted, "this isn't like the current account. This is going to be intense. 6-month timeline, aggressive targets, and I'll be involved in every detail. I need to know if you're up for it before we move forward." Relief and excitement hit Marcus simultaneously. This wasn't a problem. This was an opportunity. All that anxiety, all that weekend worry, and it was about something good. "I'm up for it," he said without hesitation. Margaret studied him for a moment. "You sure? Because once you say yes, I'm going to hold you to it. No backing out when it gets hard." "I'm sure." She nodded. "Good. We'll need to bring on 2 more people to your team. You'll have final say on who. Budget's been approved. We kick off next Monday." They spent the next hour going through initial details. By the time Marcus left her office, his head was spinning, but in a good way. He'd spent an entire weekend anxious about a meeting that turned out to be one of the best moments of his career. Back at his desk, he texted Ben, "The meeting was about a huge new opportunity. I literally worried for nothing." Ben's response came immediately. "Of course you did. That's what worry is, suffering in advance over things that usually don't happen. Lesson learned?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Getting there." The new project consumed Marcus's life for the next few months. Margaret hadn't been exaggerating. It was intense. Long hours, high pressure, constant challenges. But something was different this time. Marcus wasn't just surviving it. He was actually enjoying it. Not every moment. There were still stressful days, still moments where he felt overwhelmed. But the key difference was how he handled those moments. When something went wrong, instead of spiraling into catastrophic thinking, he'd ask, "What can I do about this right now?" When the pressure mounted, instead of carrying all 6 months of the project on his shoulders at once, he'd focus on, "What do I need to win today?" When Margaret gave harsh feedback, which she did regularly, instead of taking it personally and ruminating for days, he'd extract the useful parts and let the rest go. It was like he'd finally learned to surf instead of constantly drowning. One evening, about 2 months into the new campaign, Marcus was working late. Most of the office had cleared out. He was refining a presentation for the next day when his phone rang. It was his sister, Sarah. "Hey, what's up? Are you busy?" Her voice sounded odd. "Just working, but I can talk. Everything okay?" "It's Mom again." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "She's okay, she's fine, but she had another episode. Not as bad as last time, but the doctor wants to run more tests. They're talking about maybe more serious things." Marcus closed his laptop. "Where are you?" "St. Mary's, same as before. But Marcus, you don't have to come tonight. She's sleeping and I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, he was back in that same hospital waiting room. Sarah was there with their mom, who was awake this time, looking tired but alert. "Marcus, honey, you didn't have to come. I'm fine." "I know, but I wanted to." His mom smiled. "You're a good son." They sat together for a while, talking about nothing important. Eventually, their mom dozed off, and Marcus and Sarah moved to the hallway. "What did the doctor say?" Marcus asked. Sarah sighed. "They want to do more comprehensive tests, check her heart, her neurological function. They're concerned these episodes might be symptoms of something bigger. How long until we know? Week, maybe 2. Marcus felt the familiar weight of uncertainty settling on his shoulders, but this time he knew what to do with it. Okay, so what can we do right now? Sarah looked at him surprised. What do you mean? I mean, we can't control what the tests show. We can't speed up the results. So what can we actually do that's useful? She thought about it. Make sure she takes her medications correctly, maybe adjust her diet like the doctor suggested. Keep an eye on her. Exactly. So that's what we focus on. Sarah studied her brother. When did you get so calm about things? I'm not calm. I'm scared. But I'm learning that being scared and being useful aren't mutually exclusive. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus juggled the biggest project of his career while dealing with his mom's health uncertainty. Old Marcus would have collapsed under the weight of both, would have done everything poorly because he was trying to worry about everything simultaneously. New Marcus compartmentalized. At work, he was present at work, focused on the tasks in front of him. At the hospital or home with his mom, he was present there, not thinking about work deadlines. It wasn't about not caring. It was about recognizing that splitting his attention across multiple stressors didn't help anyone. When his mind started to wander, started to spiral into worst-case scenarios about his mom or catastrophize about the campaign launch, he'd catch himself. Is this happening right now? No. Then let it go. The campaign launch was scheduled for a Friday. 3 days before, the test results for his mom came back. The doctor called Sarah first, who immediately conferenced Marcus in. The good news is we didn't find anything immediately life-threatening, Dr. Martinez said. The episodes appear to be related to a combination of medication interactions and a minor heart arrhythmia. Both are very manageable with some adjustments. The relief was overwhelming. So she's going to be okay? Sarah asked. With proper management and monitoring, yes. She'll need to be more careful, check in regularly, but this isn't the serious neurological issue we were worried about. After the call, Marcus sat in his car for a few minutes, just breathing. His mom was going to be okay. The campaign launch was in 3 days. Everything was going to be okay. But more than that, even if things hadn't been okay, he would have handled it. He'd proven that to himself over the past 2 weeks. He'd carried uncertainty without letting it crush him. The campaign launch went better than anyone expected. The creative was sharp. The execution was flawless. Margaret's new product line got the exact attention she'd hoped for. At the launch party, Margaret pulled Marcus aside. "I want to tell you something," she said. "When I first met you, I thought you were competent, but soft, too eager to please. But you've impressed me. You've got steel in you that I didn't see at first. Thank you. That means a lot." What changed? Because something definitely changed. Marcus thought about how to answer that. I stopped trying to control outcomes and started focusing on showing up fully. I stopped letting fear of failure prevent me from trying, and I stopped carrying more weight than I needed to. Margaret nodded. Whatever it is, keep doing it. I'm recommending you for a promotion. You've earned it. After the party, Marcus, Ben, and a few other colleagues went out for drinks. Everyone was celebrating the successful launch, but Marcus found himself thinking about something bigger than the campaign. 6 months ago, He'd been a different person, anxious, risk-averse, constantly worried about everything. Now, he still felt anxiety, still had moments of doubt and fear. But the difference was he didn't let those feelings run his life anymore. He'd learned to question them, examine them, and then choose his actions based on his values rather than his fears. Ben caught his eye from across the table and raised his glass slightly. A private toast. Marcus raised his back. They both knew what they were really celebrating wasn't the campaign. It was the journey, the slow, difficult, ongoing process of learning to live instead of just survive. Late that night, Marcus was walking home through the city streets. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from colleagues, LinkedIn notifications about the campaign, an email from Lisa about the promotion discussion. But what he was thinking about was his mom, asleep in her own bed at home, healthy and safe. And he was thinking about how 6 months ago he would have ruined this entire evening worrying about whether the campaign would succeed. He would have been physically present at the party, but mentally somewhere else, catastrophizing about all the ways things could go wrong. But tonight, he'd actually been there, fully present, enjoying the moment, not because everything was perfect, but because he'd finally learned that waiting for perfect was just another way of not living. His phone rang. It was his mom. "Hi, honey. I know it's late, but I wanted to tell you how proud I am. Sarah showed me the campaign launch. It looks wonderful." "Thanks, Mom. How are you feeling?" "Good. Really good, actually. The new medications are working well." "I'm glad." "Marcus, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "You seem different lately. Happier, more present. Whatever you're doing, whatever changed, I want you to know I see it, and I'm so proud of who you're becoming." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Thanks, Mom. That means everything." After they hung up, he stood on the street corner for a moment, just taking in the city night. The lights, the sounds, the cool air. This moment, right now, was all that existed. Not yesterday's mistakes, not tomorrow's uncertainties, just this. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. Marcus's promotion came through 6 weeks after the successful campaign launch. He was now Senior Strategic Lead, a title that came with a corner office, a significant raise, and most importantly, the authority to shape how his team approached their work. His first decision in the new role surprised everyone, including himself. He started each Monday team meeting with a simple question. What are we winning today? Not this quarter, not this year, today. Some of his team members looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "But we need to think long-term," one of them said. "We can't just focus on daily wins." Marcus smiled. "We're not ignoring long-term strategy. We're just breaking it down into pieces we can actually control. Because here's what I've learned. The best way to win the year is to win the day. Every single day." He started implementing other changes, too. No more marathon meetings about hypothetical problems that might never materialize. Instead, they focused on actual issues happening now. No more elaborate backup plans for backup plans. Instead, they made good decisions with the information they had and adjusted when needed. No more culture of catastrophizing disguised as being prepared. Instead, they acknowledged risks, planned accordingly, and then moved forward. The shift was subtle but powerful. People started showing up differently, less stressed, more focused, actually engaged in their work instead of drowning in anxiety about it. One of his team members, a younger guy named Tyler, came to Marcus's office about a month into the new approach. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Sit." Tyler closed the door and sat down. "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Stay so calm. I mean, we're carrying huge accounts. There's constant pressure, but you just handle it like it doesn't get to you." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "It absolutely gets to me. I still feel the pressure, still feel anxiety. The difference is I've learned not to let it drive." "I don't understand." "You know how when you're learning to drive, they tell you to look where you want to go, not at what you're afraid of hitting?" Tyler nodded. "Same principle. I used to spend all my energy focused on everything I was afraid of. Every possible failure, every worst-case scenario, and you know what happened." "What?" "I drove straight into those things because that's where my attention was. But when I started focusing on where I wanted to go, on the actual work, the actual day in front of me, everything changed." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "But what about when something actually goes wrong? How do you handle that?" I ask myself 3 questions. What actually happened? What can I do about it? What's the next right step? That's it? No spiraling, no catastrophizing. Just those 3 questions. That's it? That's it? Simple doesn't mean easy, but it works. Tyler stood to leave, then turned back. "Thanks, Marcus. This helps." After he left, Marcus thought about that conversation. A year ago, he couldn't have had it, because a year ago, he was Tyler, drowning in anxiety, convinced that worry was somehow productive. Now, he was teaching other people how to escape that same trap. The student had become the teacher, but life, as always, had more lessons in store. One Wednesday afternoon, Marcus got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Marcus Chen?" "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Chicago PD. I'm calling about your car. It was involved in a hit-and-run incident this morning. Your vehicle was parked and sustained significant damage." Marcus's heart sank. "Is anyone hurt?" "No injuries, but your car is pretty badly damaged. We have some leads on the other driver, but I need you to come file a report." After hanging up, Marcus sat at his desk, feeling the old familiar anxiety trying to surge up. His car, which he'd just finished paying off, was totaled. He'd need to deal with insurance, police reports, finding a rental, maybe buying a new car. The old Marcus would have immediately spiraled. This is going to cost so much. What if insurance doesn't cover it? What if I can't afford a new car? What if the other driver doesn't have insurance? What if... But he caught himself. Stop. What do I actually know? Facts. Car is damaged. No one hurt. Insurance exists for this. Police are investigating. Everything else was speculation. He pulled out his phone and called his insurance company, started the claim process, found out about rental coverage, got the details he needed. Then he called a ride share to take him to the police station. Was it frustrating? Yes. Inconvenient? Absolutely. But was it worth ruining his entire week over? No. By the time he filed the police report and arranged for a rental car, it was evening. The whole situation had taken maybe 4 hours of his day. Old Marcus would have let it consume 4 days, would have replayed it endlessly, worried about every possible complication, lost sleep over it. New Marcus handled it and moved on. That night, he met Ben for dinner. "Heard about your car? That sucks, man." "Yeah, not ideal. But it is what it is." Ben raised an eyebrow. A year ago, you would have been spiraling about this. A year ago, I would have convinced myself this was some sign from the universe that everything in my life was falling apart. Now, it's just a damaged car. Annoying, but not apocalyptic. That's growth. You know what's weird, though? Marcus said, taking a sip of his drink. I almost miss the drama of it. Like, my brain is so used to making everything into a crisis that handling something calmly almost feels wrong. Ben laughed. That's normal. Your brain got addicted to the stress response. It's going to take time to fully rewire. How long did it take you? I'm still working on it. Probably will be forever. But it gets easier. The backsliding gets less frequent. The recovery gets faster. Marcus nodded. I've noticed that. I still have bad days. Days where I catch myself catastrophizing or obsessing over things I can't control. But I bounce back faster now. That's the key. It's not about never struggling. It's about struggling better. A few weeks later, Marcus faced a different kind of test. He was asked to give a keynote speech at an industry conference. 500 people. Some of the biggest names in marketing would be in attendance. The old anxiety tried to make a comeback with full force. You're going to freeze up. Everyone's going to see you're a fraud. You're going to embarrass yourself in front of the whole industry. But Marcus had developed a new relationship with these thoughts. Instead of fighting them or believing them, he just observed them. Oh, there's the catastrophizing again. Hi, old friend. Thanks for trying to keep me safe, but I've got this. He prepared for the speech methodically, wrote it out, practiced it, got feedback, refined it. But he didn't over-prepare, didn't rehearse it so many times that it became robotic, didn't create 17 backup plans for every possible thing that could go wrong. The night before the conference, his sister called. You nervous about tomorrow? A little, but it's a good nervous, like anticipation instead of dread. When did you become so zen? Marcus laughed. I'm not zen. I'm just choosing what I worry about more carefully. What does that mean? It means I can't control how the audience reacts. I can't control whether someone disagrees with me. I can't control if I stumble over a word, but I can control my preparation, my intention, and my presence. So that's where I put my energy. That's actually really smart. Yeah, well, it only took me 30 years to figure out. The next morning, Marcus stood backstage at the conference center. He could hear the crowd assembling, hundreds of people. His heart was pounding, hands slightly sweaty. But alongside the nerves was something else, readiness. He'd done the work. He had something valuable to say. The rest was just showing up. They announced his name. He walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The room was packed. For a split second, his mind tried to panic. Then he took a breath and reminded himself, be here, right now, just this moment. He started speaking, and something remarkable happened. Instead of being in his head, worried about how he was being perceived, he was actually present in the conversation he was having with the audience. When he made a point that landed, he could feel it. When something didn't quite work, he adjusted in real time. When someone asked a tough question during the Q&A, he didn't spiral. He just engaged with it honestly. 45 minutes later, he finished to strong applause. Walking off stage, he felt proud. Not because it had been perfect. There were moments he could have done better. But because he'd shown up fully. He'd been present instead of performing. Afterward, several people came up to talk to him. One was a marketing director from a Fortune 500 company. That was a great talk. What you said about focusing on daily wins instead of quarterly anxiety really resonated. Thanks. I learned it the hard way. Haven't we all? The director handed him a business card. Let's connect. I'd love to hear more about how you implement this with your team. As Marcus walked out of the conference center that evening, he reflected on how different this experience was from the presentations that used to paralyze him. The content wasn't that different. The stakes were actually higher, but his relationship to the fear had completely changed. He no longer saw anxiety as something to eliminate. It was just information, a signal that something mattered to him. The trick was acknowledging it without letting it run the show. That weekend, Marcus visited his mom. She was doing well. The medication adjustments had stabilized her episodes, and she'd regained much of her energy. They were sitting in her garden, drinking iced tea, when she said something that caught him off guard. You know what I regret most about my life? Marcus looked over. What? I spent so much time worrying about you and Sarah, about money, about what people thought, about everything. She paused. And you know what all that worry got me? What? Nothing, absolutely nothing except wasted time and stress headaches. Marcus smiled gently. You did great, Mom. Sarah and I turned out okay. You did, but not because I worried. You turned out okay because I loved you and did my best. The worry was just extra, unnecessary weight I carried for no reason. When did you realize that? When I had my first episode, when I was lying in that hospital bed, I remember thinking I might die. And if I do, what will I regret? And you know what it wasn't? It wasn't the things I tried and failed at. It wasn't the risks I took. It was all the time I spent afraid instead of living. Marcus felt his throat tighten. His mom continued, I see you doing something different. You're not carrying the same weight I carried, and I'm glad. Learn from my mistakes, honey. Don't wait until you're my age to figure out that most of what we worry about never happens. They sat in silence for a while, just being together. Finally, Marcus said, You know what helped me the most? What? Accepting that I can't control most things, and that's okay. I can't control outcomes. I can't prevent bad things from happening. I can't guarantee success. All I can do is show up, do my best, and be present for whatever comes. His mom nodded. That's wisdom. Real wisdom. I had good teachers. Marcus squeezed her hand. She smiled. We all need good teachers, but at some point you have to become your own teacher, and you have. I'm proud of you. Monday morning, Marcus was back in his office preparing for a new week. His phone buzzed, a text from Tyler. Morning meeting question, what are we winning today? Marcus smiled. The message was spreading. He typed back, exactly. Keep asking that question every single day. Another message came through, this time from Ben. Coffee later. Want to run something by you? Always. 4 p.m.? Perfect. Marcus looked out his office window at the Chicago skyline. Morning sun reflecting off glass towers. The city waking up. A year ago, he would have been sitting here anxious about a dozen things, most of which would never happen. Today, he was just here, present, ready for whatever the day would bring, not because he'd eliminated all fear or uncertainty, but because he'd learned to carry them differently. He'd learned that worry was optional, that catastrophizing was a choice, that control was largely an illusion, and in learning those things, he'd found something unexpected. Freedom. The freedom to actually live instead of constantly preparing for imaginary disasters. The freedom to be present instead of trapped in past regrets or future anxieties. The freedom to show up fully for this one precious life he had. His computer chimed. First meeting in 10 minutes. Marcus grabbed his coffee and headed to the conference room, ready for today. Just today. Because that's all anyone ever really has. 6 months after his keynote speech, Marcus received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Speaking Opportunity, TEDx Chicago." He opened it, assuming it was spam or a mistake. It wasn't. "Dear Marcus, your keynote at the Marketing Innovation Conference was brought to our attention. We're organizing TEDx Chicago this fall and would love to have you speak about mental resilience and living in the present. Are you interested?" Marcus stared at the screen. TEDx. The platform where ideas spread, where talks got millions of views, where careers were made. Old Marcus would have immediately thought, "I'm not qualified for this. They made a mistake. I'll embarrass myself on a global stage." New Marcus thought, "This is terrifying, and I'm going to do it anyway." He hit reply, "I'm honored and interested. Let's talk." Preparing for a TEDx talk was different from anything Marcus had done before. It wasn't a presentation to clients. It wasn't a strategy pitch. It was a distillation of everything he'd learned, everything he'd lived through, condensed into 18 minutes. The TEDx organizers connected him with a speaking coach named Rachel. Their first session was humbling. "Tell me your story," Rachel said. Marcus launched into what he thought was a compelling narrative about marketing strategies and professional growth. Rachel stopped him after 2 minutes. "That's not your story. That's your resume. I want to know, what changed in you? What did you learn that transformed how you live?" Marcus paused. "I learned to stop worrying about things I can't control." "Everyone says that. Go deeper. When did you learn it? What was the moment?" Marcus thought back. To that first conversation with Ben, to sitting in the hospital with his mom, to standing on stage at the conference center. "I learned it when I realized I'd been living my entire life in a state of constant emergency, like I was always preparing for disaster instead of actually living." "Now we're getting somewhere. Tell me about that." Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked with Rachel to craft his talk. It was harder than any project he'd led at work. Because this wasn't about selling something or convincing someone. This was about truth, about vulnerability, about admitting that he'd spent 30 years of his life anxious, afraid, and missing out on the present moment. One evening, after a particularly tough coaching session, Marcus called Ben. "I'm not sure I can do this." "The talk?" "Yeah. Rachel keeps pushing me to be more vulnerable, to share the messy parts, and I don't know if I can stand on a stage and tell hundreds of people, and potentially millions online, how broken I used to be." Ben was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "The reason I started helping you wasn't because I had it all figured out. It was because I saw myself in you, and I remembered how alone I felt when I was going through it." "I didn't know that." "I didn't tell you, but here's what I learned. The messy parts aren't weaknesses. They're the connection points. When you share the real struggle, that's when people actually hear you. Because everyone's struggling. They just think they're the only ones. Marcus sat with that. So, you're saying I should tell the embarrassing parts? I'm saying tell the true parts. The embarrassing stuff usually happens to be the truest. The weeks leading up to the talk were intense. Marcus practiced obsessively, but caught himself when the practice turned into anxiety. He refined his message, but stopped before he over-refined it into something sterile and safe. He prepared, but remembered that preparation and worry were different things. The night before TEDx, Marcus couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety. Well, not entirely. There was nervousness, sure, but mostly it was anticipation. He'd spent so long running from fear that he'd forgotten what it felt like to run towards something that mattered. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went to his kitchen, made tea, sat by the window. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "Can't sleep either. Too excited for you. Remember, just be yourself. That's enough." He smiled and texted back, "Thanks, Mom. Love you." Another text, this one from Sarah. "You're going to crush it. Proud of you, little brother." Then Ben, "Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won because you showed up. Sleep well." Marcus looked at the messages and felt something shift in his chest. He wasn't alone in this. He never had been. All this time, he'd spent thinking he had to figure everything out by himself, carry every burden alone, prove something to everyone. But the truth was simpler. We're all just people, trying to figure it out, needing each other. He went back to bed and, surprisingly, fell asleep. The day of TEDx arrived bright and clear. Marcus got to the venue early. The theater was beautiful. Red velvet seats, perfect acoustics, the iconic circular red carpet on stage. Other speakers were milling around backstage, all dealing with their own nerves in different ways. Some were pacing. Others were meditating. One woman was doing vocal warm-ups. Marcus found a quiet corner and just sat. Rachel found him there. "How are you feeling?" "Surprisingly okay." "Good. Remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. The audience doesn't need perfection. They need connection." "I know. I'm ready." "One more thing." Rachel handed him a small note card. "Don't open this until right before you go on." 2 hours later, Marcus was in the wings, watching the speaker before him finish their talk. He pulled out Rachel's note card. It read, "You're not giving this talk to teach people something they don't know. You're giving it to remind them of something they forgot. Go remind them." Marcus folded the card and put it in his pocket. The host walked on stage. Our next speaker spent most of his life running from fear. Today, he's going to tell you what he found when he finally stopped running. Please welcome Marcus Chen. The applause started. Marcus took a breath. "Be here," he told himself. "Just be here." He walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, but he could see faces in the front rows. Real people, waiting to hear what he had to say. He stood at the center of the red circle and began. "I want to tell you about the worst year of my life," Marcus started. "It was 12 months where nothing particularly terrible happened. I didn't lose my job. Nobody died. I didn't get sick. But it was the worst year because I lived it entirely in my head. In the past I couldn't change, and the future I couldn't control. I was physically present, but mentally absent from every single day." He could see people nodding. "I'd wake up every morning replaying mistakes from yesterday, last week, last year. Conversations I wish I'd handled differently, decisions I regretted, opportunities I'd missed, and then, before I'd even gotten out of bed, my brain would jump to the future. What if I fail at work? What if something happens to someone I love? What if, what if, what if? Marcus paused, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. The crazy thing is, I thought this was normal. I thought everyone lived like this. I thought anxiety was just a price of being a responsible adult. But I was wrong. Anxiety isn't responsibility. It's just suffering in advance over things that usually never happen. He told them about Ben, about the flashlight metaphor, about learning to ask, "What can I win today?" He told them about his mom's health scares and learning to accept what he couldn't control. He told them about the car accident and choosing not to let inconvenience become catastrophe. And he told them the truth, that he still struggled, that this wasn't a story about someone who fixed themselves and now lived anxiety-free. "I still have hard days," he said, "days where my brain wants to catastrophize about everything, days where I catch myself spiraling into worry. The difference is, now I know what to do with those moments. I don't fight them. I don't judge myself for having them. I just notice them and choose differently." He shared his 3 questions. What actually happened? What can I do about it? What's the next right step? That's it. No elaborate system, no expensive therapy, though therapy can be great. Just 3 simple questions that shift you from panic mode to problem-solving mode. Marcus could see people in the audience taking notes, nodding, some wiping their eyes. Here's what I want you to understand. Most of what we worry about never happens. And even when it does, the worrying beforehand doesn't make it hurt less. It just means we suffered twice, once in anticipation and once in reality. He talked about the concept of day-tight compartments, living your life in daily units instead of trying to carry the weight of your entire past and future simultaneously. Imagine your life is like a ship crossing an ocean. If you leave all the doors between compartments open, one leak can sink the entire vessel. But if you seal each day as its own compartment, a bad Tuesday doesn't have to ruin your whole week. A difficult month doesn't have to destroy your year. He was approaching the end of his talk. 18 minutes goes faster than you'd think. I used to believe that worry kept me safe, that catastrophizing was a form of preparation, that if I imagined every possible bad outcome, somehow I'd be ready for anything. But you know what I learned? The worst-case scenario I spent years terrifying myself about, losing my job, losing relationships, failing publicly. When some of those things actually came close to happening, I handled them. Not because I'd worried about them, but because when they actually showed up, I was present enough to deal with them. Marcus looked out at the audience one more time. So here's my challenge to you. What would your life look like if you stopped living it as a series of emergencies waiting to happen? What if you just lived today? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, just today. Ask yourself every morning, what can I win today? Not this year, not this quarter, just today. And when you win enough days, you wake up one morning and realize you've won your life. He paused, letting that land. We can't control most of what happens to us, but we can control where we put our attention. And attention is the most powerful tool we have. So stop giving it to imaginary disasters. Stop spending it on regrets you can't change. Give it to this moment, right here, right now, because this moment is all we ever really have, and it's enough. The audience erupted into applause. Marcus stood there taking it in, and for the first time in his life, he was fully present for his own success. Not thinking about what came next, not analyzing how he did, just experiencing this moment. He walked off stage to even more applause. Backstage, Rachel was waiting with tears in her eyes. That was perfect. You were completely present up there. I was. For the first time in my life, I think I really was. The talk went viral. Within a week, it had 1 million views. Within a month, 5 million. Comments poured in from around the world. I've been living in anxiety for 20 years. This gave me hope. I'm sharing this with everyone I know. This is life-changing. I've spent so much time worrying about tomorrow that I forgot to live today. Thank you. Marcus's inbox exploded with speaking requests, interview offers, people wanting to share their stories. It was overwhelming, but he'd learned how to handle overwhelming one day at a time, one response at a time, one choice at a time. 3 months after the TEDx talk, Marcus was back in his office when Tyler knocked on his door. "Got a minute?" "Always." "Come in." Tyler sat down, looking nervous. "So I watched your TEDx talk. Multiple times, actually." "Yeah? What'd you think?" "It changed my life. Seriously. I've been dealing with anxiety since college, and I thought it was just who I am. But you showed me it's just something I'm experiencing, not my identity." Marcus smiled. "That's exactly it. You're not an anxious person. You're a person experiencing anxiety. Big difference." "I wanted to tell you something else," Tyler continued. "I applied for that position in the London office, the one I told you I wasn't ready for." "That's great. When did you decide to go for it?" "After your talk. You said something that stuck with me. Stop waiting to feel ready and just start showing up." So I stopped waiting. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying, but also right. Like I'm finally moving forward instead of just preparing to move forward." After Tyler left, Marcus sat back in his chair, marveling at the ripple effect. He'd changed because Ben had helped him. Now he was helping Tyler, and Tyler would probably help someone else. That's how it worked. That's how change spread. One person at a time, one conversation at a time, one choice at a time. That weekend, Marcus drove to visit his mom. She was in her garden, her favorite place, tending to her tomato plants. "Look at these," she said proudly, pointing to perfect red tomatoes. "Best batch I've grown in years." "They're beautiful, Mom." They sat together on the garden bench, the same one where they'd had that conversation about regret. "I've been thinking about what you said," his mom began, "about worry being wasted time." "Yeah? I'm trying to do better. When I catch myself worrying about you or Sarah, I stop and ask, is this helping? And usually it's not. So I just let it go." Marcus put his arm around her. "How's that going?" "It's hard. 65 years of habit doesn't change overnight. But I'm getting better. And you know what? I'm enjoying my days more. I'm actually present in my garden instead of being here physically, but worrying mentally about 1,000 things." "I'm proud of you, Mom." She laughed. "I'm supposed to say that to you? We can both say it." They sat in comfortable silence watching butterflies dance around the flowers. Finally, his mom said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "We teach people how to live not by what we say, but by how we live. You've taught me more in the past year than I taught you in 30. You taught me everything that mattered, Mom. I just needed some time to understand it. She squeezed his hand. Well, you're understanding it now, and I'm grateful I get to see it. That night, Marcus met Ben at their usual spot, the coffee shop where this whole journey had really begun. Seems like just yesterday we were here and you were freaking out about that presentation, Ben said, grinning. A year and a half ago. Feels like a lifetime. How does it feel? The TEDx success, the speaking requests, all of it? Marcus thought about it. Honestly, it feels good. But what feels better is that I'm not making it mean more than it is. It's not proof that I'm finally worthy or successful. It's just a thing that happened. A good thing, but still just a thing. That's maturity right there. I keep thinking about what you told me at the beginning, about the flashlight. How you can only see 10 feet ahead, so just focus on those 10 feet. Still true? Yeah, but now I get it in a deeper way. It's not just about not worrying about the future. It's about trusting that the next 10 feet will show up when you need them. That you don't have to have the whole path figured out. You just have to take the next step. Ben raised his coffee cup. To taking the next step, Marcus raised his. To being here for it. They sat together, two friends who learned the same essential truth from different painful experiences. That life isn't happening in some perfect future when everything finally comes together. Life is happening right now, in this conversation, in this moment, in this breath, and learning to actually be present for it, fully, completely, without resistance. That's what it means to stop worrying and start living. Epilogue, 1 year later. Marcus stood in front of a new audience. This time, it wasn't a marketing conference or a TEDx stage. It was a small community center in a struggling neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. 30 people sat in folding chairs, some teenagers, some adults, all dealing with their own versions of anxiety, trauma, and uncertainty. Marcus had started doing these talks for free after the TEDx success, because he'd realized something. The people who needed this message most weren't the ones who could afford conference tickets or had time to watch 18-minute videos. They were people working 3 jobs, single parents, kids trying to survive high school, people carrying weight that made Marcus's previous anxiety look trivial. I'm not here to tell you that positive thinking will solve your problems, Marcus began, because that's bullshit. If you're dealing with real poverty, real trauma, real systemic barriers, thinking positive thoughts won't fix that. He could see people relaxing slightly. They'd heard too many speakers trying to sell them easy answers. But here's what I can tell you. You can't control most of what happens to you, but you can control where you put your attention. And that matters more than you might think. He shared a story, not the polished TEDx version, but the real messy version, the panic attacks, the paralysis, the years wasted in worry, and he shared what he'd learned, that you survive life one day at a time. That worry doesn't prevent pain, it just adds to it. That being present is a skill you can learn. After the talk, a young woman approached him. She couldn't have been more than 20. "I have a question," she said quietly. "Of course." What if the worst-case scenario isn't imaginary? What if it's real and happening right now? Marcus recognized that question. It wasn't theoretical for her. Then you focus on what you can do in this moment. Not tomorrow, not next week, just this moment. What's one small thing you can do right now that moves you forward? She thought about it. I could call my friend, ask for help. That's something. Start there. Then tomorrow, you figure out tomorrow's next step. That's it? That's it? One step, one day, one choice? She nodded slowly, then surprised him by hugging him. Thank you. I thought I had to fix everything at once. No one can fix everything at once. We just do today. Later that night, Marcus was driving home through the city streets. His phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he answered anyway. Marcus Chen? Yes? This is Dr. Patricia Williams from the American Psychological Association. We've been following your work. The TEDx talk. The community outreach. We'd like to invite you to be part of a national mental health initiative we're launching. Marcus pulled over to focus on the conversation. They talked for 20 minutes about the initiative, a program to teach resilience and present-moment awareness in schools, workplaces, and communities across the country. We need people who can communicate these concepts in accessible ways, Dr. Williams said. Your approach, practical, honest, without toxic positivity. That's what we're looking for. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his car processing. 2 years ago, he'd been the guy who couldn't get through a presentation without panicking. Now he was being asked to help shape a national mental health program. Old Marcus would have immediately questioned whether he deserved it, whether he was qualified, whether he'd somehow mess it up. New Marcus just thought, this is an opportunity to help people. I'll do my best. And that was enough. When Marcus finally got home, he found a letter in his mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. He opened it. Dear Marcus, you don't know me, but I watched your TEDx talk 3 months ago when I was planning to end my life. I had the pills ready. I was done. But I watched your talk first. I don't even know why. And something you said stopped me. You said, what can you win today? Just today. And I thought, maybe I can win today, just today. So I called a crisis line instead. Started therapy. I'm not fixed. I'm still struggling, but I'm here. I'm alive. And I wanted you to know that your words saved my life. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story. The letter was signed simply, someone who's still here. Marcus sat on his couch, letter in hand, and cried. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming weight of realizing that vulnerability, that sharing the messy truth, that admitting his struggles, it had literally saved someone's life. He'd spent so long trying to appear perfect, trying to hide his anxiety, trying to prove he had it all together. But it was the broken parts, the honest, struggling, imperfect parts that had actually helped someone. That Sunday, Marcus had lunch with his entire family. His mom, looking healthier than she had in years, Sarah and her new partner, even Ben, who'd become like family. Over pasta and wine, they told stories, laughed, argued about nothing important. Marcus looked around the table and realized, this is what I was missing when I was too busy worrying about tomorrow. This moment, these people, this life. Sarah raised her glass. I want to toast my brother, who went from the most anxious person I knew to, well, still anxious, but functional. Everyone laughed. But seriously, she continued, I'm proud of you. You did the hard work. You changed. And you're helping other people change too. Here, his mom added. Ben caught Marcus's eye and gave him a small nod, a private acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. Marcus raised his glass. "I want to toast all of you, because I didn't do this alone. Nobody changes alone. We need people who believe in us even when we don't believe in ourselves. So thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up on me, for reminding me what actually matters." They clinked glasses and drank. And in that moment, Marcus was completely, fully, perfectly present. Not thinking about tomorrow's tasks or yesterday's regrets. Just here, just now, just alive. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Marcus opened his journal. He'd started keeping it after the TEDx talk, not to track accomplishments, but to track moments of presence. Days when he'd actually shown up for his life instead of just surviving it. He wrote, "Today, I realized something. The goal was never to stop worrying completely. The goal was to stop letting worry run my life. I still feel anxiety, still have moments of doubt and fear, but now I see them for what they are. Just feelings, passing weather in the mind, not facts, not commands, just feelings." The biggest lie I believed for 30 years was that I had to feel confident before I could act, that I had to eliminate fear before I could move forward. But that's backwards. You act despite the fear, and somewhere in the action, the confidence appears, not before, after. What can I win today? That question changed my life, not because it made things easy, but because it made them possible. When you stop trying to win your whole life at once and just focus on winning today, just this one day, everything becomes manageable. And when you win, enough days you wake up one morning and realize, I won, not perfectly, not without struggle, but I won. I'm alive, I'm present, I'm here, and that's enough. Marcus closed the journal and looked out his window at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, someone was struggling with the same anxiety he'd carried for years. Somewhere, someone was lying awake worrying about things that would never happen. Somewhere, someone was missing their life because they were too busy preparing for imaginary disasters. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find his talk, or someone else's story, or their own Ben, and they'd learn what Marcus had learned, that life isn't happening later, it's happening now, and the only thing standing between you and actually living it is the decision to stop worrying about tomorrow and start showing up for today. Marcus smiled, turned off the light, and went to bed, ready for tomorrow, but more importantly, grateful for today.